every pony and every creature. Welcome to tonight's podcast at DAG. As always, this is Dratta Arcana, and welcome to Dratta Talks. And joining me tonight is a very special guest.
Oh, hi, I'm Jennifer Sinnott, also known as Kiashone.
And Kiashone made the lovely OC plushie for me that you probably all have seen around. Especially at BronyCon. I can't count the number of boobs. So, you've been making plushies for quite some time, haven't you?
About 2012, I think. So, it's been a while. Let's see, 7 years?
7 years. So, you know, I have to give you credit that plushie you made for Lightning Bliss of Euphoria was amazing. I wanted to bid on that, but I didn't have the money.
Thanks. I have to make another one of those at some point. They're a lot of work.
I bet. Do you do custom orders for those?
Not for Euphoria. Like, we're thinking about doing little printed ones.
Okay.
I haven't started that yet, but we plan to do those at some point.
So, one of the things in this fandom for bronies is we love our plushies. You know, we need to hug them, we need cuddles, we need, you know, the plushies. But take us through the process of kind of making a plushie. Like, how do you start?
It's kind of hard to explain exactly what to do. But it always starts off with an image. For me, it starts off with a commissioner, and then they give me the images. I look them over, see what I have to edit. Some things I can't do, some things that, like gradients and cutie marks aren't really easy to do with the embroidery machine. So then I have to make the eyes and the cutie mark, and then I make that into a digital file. From the digital file, I stick that in an embroidery machine, and then the embroidery machine will thread everything up. I'm doing this poorly.
No, it's fine. Just, you know, I actually find that interesting that you actually have a machine that does it straight from the computer.
You can plug it in the computer if I use a stick drive.
Oh, okay. I guess every plushie maker has their way of doing it. I've always thought that you guys hand did the eyes.
There's some of us that are crazy enough to do so. But that takes hours. After you get the embroidery work done, you have to cut out the pattern. If you don't already have the pattern, you should have done that first before you did the embroidery work. Then after you get the pattern all cut up, I actually have a machine that cuts the fabric for me, depending on the pattern, actually. If it's custom, then I have to cut it out myself. And I have I'm not sure if it's pronounced Cricut cutter or circuit cutter, or circuit. I'm not sure, but it cuts everything out. And then I just sew it together with my machine. Then I make foot inserts to make the feet flat. It's made out of foam. Then I stuff it. And then I start hand sewing, and then I work on the mane and tail from there for a traditional pony.
Okay.
And then wings and horns are following that pretty quickly.
Okay. So that kind of gives us a kind of basics of kind of the process. But, you know, how do you choose the fabric? Because when I look at, you know, some people, you know, when they think of a plushie, they think of the Hasbro, you know, official line. Those teeny babies and everything, the official My Little Pony. What is it that makes, you know, the fandom plushies? What do you guys do different than what they do?
Pretty much. Well, the difference between them is actually if they're manufactured by a company or if it's by just a person at home. Usually when they're manufactured in a company, it's a lot of just mass producing and things like errors and, like, you know, eyes that are upside down or a little wonky. Those will slip by them all the time, and so you might find a little bit of an oddball. With a handmade plush, you're getting something that one person has spent hours on, and it's not going to look weird. Well, it shouldn't look weird.
True.
If it does look weird, that just means you've got a new plush maker who's still just learning the ropes.
Yeah, and you guys always do a phenomenal job, and everyone I know in the fandom really loves, especially your plushies. You know, your plushies tend to come up a lot at conventions.
I actually noticed that. I don't get to go to many PonyCon, so when I went to BronyCon this year, I couldn't go about 50 feet without seeing something I made. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, well, there's more here than I thought there would be. And then I looked into it. It's like, oh, I've made a lot of plushies.
And they all like get traveled around and everything. I know that my OC plushie, the one that you made for me of Dratta Arcana, I've carried that thing to almost every single pony event that I've gone to.
Oh my gosh. Some of the plushies I actually have, they go straight to other countries even. So they are everywhere.
I bet. And I bet that gives you a sense of pride.
I'm not really prideful. I get excited when they go to new places. But
Okay.
I just like sewing, so
Okay.
it's perfect for me.
I'm terrible at sewing, so I'm glad that you're there to do it for me.
That's the other reason. You pay us to do it because you can't do it yourself.
Exactly. And honestly, I'm always looking for quality. Whenever I do something, whenever I'm looking to do a commission, like I can't draw, I can't, make a plushie, I can't, make clothes. I can't make all the stuff that the fandom makes. But I know that there's people out there that do it.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of commissions for whether they be OCs or whether they're, actual like Twilight or Luna or Celestia, Cadence, or Rainbow Dash, what's kind of like, which do you tend to see more often when getting requested for commissions?
Well, back in 2012, it used to be the main six, and then over time, it just became OC, OC, OC. Now it's like if I get any canon, I'm kind of like, oh yay, something I've done before, so I don't have to repattern it out. It's so rare to see a canon pony nowadays. I just make OCs a lot.
And OCs I know can be very, very difficult. Like my own with the horn probably was a challenge for you.
Actually, horn, it's only a two-piece pattern, so horn's not hard at all.
Okay.
The hardest part is actually the mane.
Really? Interesting. I did not know that. What's the hardest plushie you've ever made?
Oh gosh, let me think that over for a second. It's been a long time since I've had nightmares. So I'm trying to remember which was my nightmare plush. I might actually have to look through my old gallery.
Well,
It's been so long.
It comes to mind.
Yeah, nothing comes to mind right now, but if I just look through my galleries, oh yeah, I found one. It was an OC that was part dragon, part pony.
Ooh, wow, I bet that was tough.
Well, it wasn't really the tough part. It was the fact that it had so much embroidery work on it. Like it had tons of spots on it. It had an applique mane and tail. I had to applique its wings into three different colors, actually, not two. It was just a lot of applique.
Okay.
Oh, an applique is when you sew fabric on top of other fabric to make an image or to make a different color change.
Okay.
I
Well,
forgot to
that would
mention
be
that.
important to know because you can use terms, and then the rest of us will be like, "What does that mean?"
I realized that applique was not a universal word, which is why I thought I would explain it real quick.
That's fine. So, what's so these a lot of times plushies take a really long time to make, I've noticed. How do you balance that workload when you get like 5 or 6 commissions, or you got a convention coming up and you got to make X number of plushies to sell at the convention while still getting your commissions done? How do you balance that?
Well, normally when it comes to commissions and conventions, I'll either put the list on hold if I'm really in a time crunch. Like this past summer, I had a move and I still needed to set up for BronyCon, but I still needed funds. because I'm moving. So I had to put a hold after a certain point and just focus purely on the commissions. But normally I plan well in advance, and then I use my weekends to as my free time to make whatever stock I need. And usually for cons, I make canon stuff or fandom stuff. And since those are patterns I already have, they go a lot quicker. And then I just make the work week for OC commissions or regular commissions.
Okay. What's the easiest canon character to make?
Easiest canon. It's pretty much Pinkie Pie. Because she's literally a 3-part mane and tail. Like, the bodies are all the same. So with the tail, it's only 2 pieces, and it's just embroidery work on both sides. And because that's what you do on the lines is the embroidery work. And then the mane is the same exact way, and it's usually 2 to 3 pieces, depending on how many little notches on her mane you want. But she's the easiest.
Okay. Well, here's another question. I know that there's some plushie makers out there that allow you to order different size plushies, from life size all the way to, beanie size. How have you made a life size plushie before?
I have not. I made a 2-foot one. It was a Celestia, but I guess the closest to life size might have been Twink, but he's just a really big plushie too. But the reason I haven't made life size ones is they're really hard to ship, and I really don't want to figure out how to ship them. The difference in making them though depends on your stitch work. So when you're sewing, you actually have to have double seams to keep it from bursting open.
Okay. So what does it mean by the difference between double seamed?
Pretty much the regular seam is just a single straight line done by the machine. And I should probably mention real quick, I use an antique sewing machine that doesn't have like multi-stitch, it's just a straight stitch line. So it doesn't do special, what's the word? I'm trying to remember the word for it. It's a machine that does multi-stitching where it also crips the edges. I know it. A serger. I don't have a serger machine.
Oh, okay.
And it's like the common stitch work you'd see on like any factory made clothes you buy from the store, where it has the kind of like a tucked in seam. And I don't have that, but if you have that, that'd be better to use on a larger one. I just like my antique one because I'm able to make tighter turns on smaller beanies.
Okay. Well,
and I think I got sidetracked from what I was originally talking about.
It's fine. We get sidetracked all the time. So I'm sure that there's a lot of bronies out there and Pegasisters that may want to learn how to make their own plushies, because I can imagine that starting out is difficult. What's your recommendations for anyone wanting to start plushie making?
The way I started, well, I already knew how to use the sewing machine. So if you don't know how to use sewing machines, you might need to just look up a YouTube tutorial on it real quick. But it's pretty much start and go. As for just getting patterns, the patterns are actually the hardest part in, the start of plush making, because you don't know how to put this together to make this shape, and because it has to be 2D to 3D. I recommend always trying out someone else's pattern first, and then learning how that works before trying to develop your own. And there's resources online for free patterns, and there's even a Plush Artists United group on Facebook that'll help you figure out where to go from making patterns to machine purchases and so on.
Okay. Well, if patterns were the easiest part, I wonder what's your recommendation for the actual fabric? What do you normally suggest for the fabric type?
Well, with beginners, I definitely recommend fleece because it's cheaper and you're going to make a lot of mistakes. But once you kind of get the hang of it, you would definitely want to go with minky because that's what gives you the nice soft pile. And it's also a forgiving fabric, so if you're a little off, it stretches to accommodate your mistakes.
I noticed that a lot of plushie makers in the fandom use minky.
I'm not sure if it was because White Dove had originally started it, or I really have no idea why the origins of minky became so popular for plushies, but it works perfectly because it's a short pile, and a pile is the fluff on the top of the fabric. And it's usually 3 millimeters. Sometimes you can find 5 millimeters, so it's slightly longer, and then they look a little extra fluffy. But it's just the right amount of length of fur for the ponies.
Okay. So yeah, and excuse me. I'm sure that a lot of people out there, that, and maybe even some of the plushie makers out there, kind of like, I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm having one of those nights. Give me a second. Kind of, what's your process when you get a non-pony commission?
Oh, that's a little tricky. So it depends on what they give me. Like I have human patterns already made, so that's easy for me to quote. Like if I have a pattern already made for something, I could quote it pretty quickly. But if it's something I've never done and I have no pattern remotely similar to it, I have to think, okay, what's the size they need it in? And then I have to add up the size, the cost of materials, and if it's very complex, the cost of making this new design. And I also have to make a new pattern test before I actually make the final plush. So it's a lot of work just to get those a new body type out there. Okay. But it's not impossible for me. I just don't take them on too often because I usually get ponies, and ponies are already put together in some sense with a pattern for me.
Okay. Well, here's maybe a short answer question for you, but I'm just curious. What's the difference between a plushie and a stuffed animal?
Oh gosh. Well, it depends on the stuffing and if what it's meant for. Stuffed animals are meant for, loving, cuddling, hugging, and they're usually a little cheaper made. Well, a plushie, on the other hand, is more of a figurine, and they're meant to look cool. They're also more firm, so they're not supposed to just like fall apart quickly. Trying to think of other things. But for the most part, they're about the same. It just depends on the purpose of it.
Okay. Yet, technically, if stuffed animals were for cuddling, then we still cuddle our plushies. So, would that make them stuffed animals?
I mean, that could. It's just how you define a word.
Well, I know one thing that does happen to plushies a lot, especially those of us that cuddle them almost every night, and they get dirty. And,
yeah.
It's bound to happen. How do you, so let's say those of us that can't afford to ship the plushie back to the person that made it, how do we go about cleaning our own plushies? What do you recommend?
Now, what's been recommended in the past, and I'll tell you something completely different in a moment because I have two stories. What I recommend and what I've been told online is you take a toothbrush, 1 part of Downy to like a gallon of water, and you soak it and you just kind of brush it with a toothbrush and get the dirt off. However, if you have a necessarily really dirty plushie, it's not advised to put them in the washing machine. But as a plush maker, I wanted to experiment a little. And Lightning Bliss actually had to refurbish her plush recently. She had gave it to me at BronyCon, and I took it home. And I'm like, well, how am I going to clean her? Because she has white fur. It's really, really dirty. She stuck it to a lot of cons. And I'm like, well, the only way to clean things really well is the washing machine. And I'm like, well, I don't really want to damage it. Like, well, okay, if I damage it, I'll just make her a completely new plushie. It'll be fine. We'll see what happens because there's no other way I can refurbish this. So I put it in my washing machine on a delicate cycle with a little bit of soap. And I flipped her over halfway because the type of washing machine I have doesn't have a center column. It has like a little tiny flat one. And I flip her over halfway and she's like soaking and it's just so filthy. It's like the dirtiest water you've ever seen. And I'm just like, wow, I'm really glad I put her in here. I when I pull her out, I'm expecting to kind of see like, something popped or some sort of, just something damaged. And the only thing that happened was her ears got bent and they're wired, so you just bend them back into place. And I'm like, okay. And I should note I did cut off the mane and tail first because I didn't know if the black would seep into the white when I was washing it. I didn't want color run.
Right.
And then I put her in the dryer, but I put her on a very, very low setting. And then after that, I let her air dry. So I fluffed her up a bit, and then I let her air dry. And then I just sewed back the mane and tail. Well, I washed the mane and tail separately, and then I sewed it on. I didn't just put the dirty mane and tail back on. But I don't usually advise putting in the washing machine, especially if you don't know if the hand craftsmanship is good, because some people's hand sewing isn't as tight. But apparently mine is. So if you actually do need to use it, chances are they're going to hold up pretty well. And if they don't, then there's probably just a minor repair. But for the most part, if the soap, well, the Downy and water mixture with the toothbrush doesn't work for you, you got to go to extreme measures.
Okay. Well, that's too bad for Lightning Bliss's plushie.
No, her plush is fine.
Oh, no, I know, but it got so dirty.
Well, things happen, and I got to refurbish her, and I had to update her little hoovesies got wore out.
Okay.
The little gold on them, and I had to update those. So she looks almost as good as new. It's just after a while, Minky becomes kind of matted in some sense. I'm not really sure how to phrase it, but it didn't look as fresh as it once did. Still, she looks way better than she did before, and at least she's clean, and she's now scented, and that's a pretty awesome thing. Yeah. When you hug her, she smells like lilacs.
So that's a good example of like needing to do a deep clean. What about just regular maintenance? What do you suggest?
Probably just baby wipes. Just go against the grain and then go down. Just using regular baby wipes would be the best option for something that's just kind of like dust. It'd be great for removing dust.
Okay. Now, I keep hearing this term from both plushie makers and fursuit makers called airbrushing. Now, what does that do, actually? How do you actually airbrush those?
Well, airbrushing obviously is a machine that spits paint out with air pressure. And your plush actually has that on the end of its wings. But pretty much it's just painting the plush, and it makes the fabric a little stiffer. But it adds that gradient of color that most people put on their plushies. That's about it on that.
Oh, okay. I thought that it was some cleaning technique for some reason.
It's just adding color. Okay. It's painting.
Which reminds me, I think my OC's wingtips need to be redone. I had someone at BronyCon towards the end of the convention when they were starting to get really faded. Someone actually looked at my plushie like, "Is that dirt on your plushie's wings?" And I'm like, "No, he's supposed to have gold tip feathers."
Oh, is that gold? Yeah. I could have put gold. I thought it was like a cream. I could have actually put some gold on it instead, and I just made it cream.
No, it's fine. It's supposed to show. My OC has like aged feathers. It's supposed to kind of look like aged feather tips.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's part of the wing design. So I gotta send him back to you at some point to get that redone. But
the wings or the whole cleaning?
The wings. My plushie won't be nearly as bad. My plushie will be nowhere near as bad as probably Lightning Bliss.
Well, white ponies get really dirty really quickly.
True.
Well, I mean, all ponies get equally dirty quickly. It's just it shows up worse on white ponies.
Okay. See, that's why I'm glad I made it gray.
Yeah, gray. Pretty much anything that isn't white or like tan is a good choice for a base color.
Yeah. I guess there is some white on my OC, but I try to keep him like off the ground. And so here's a good question. What do you recommend that those of us that buy your guys' plushies, because we spent a lot of money on these to have you guys make these, what do you recommend as far as trying to like a prevention measure when it comes
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. But you can always keep them in clear plastic bags and just keep them stored. Some people put them in cases. For the most part, like with my plushies, I just keep some felt and keep it underneath them, and then I just wipe them down every now and then. That's all I do. But I don't take mine to cons either. I just keep them at home.
So, like putting it on an actual table with cloth on the table and stuff is like recommended.
It keeps the hooves from getting dirty.
Okay.
And because tables build up dust, or you can just wipe the table off prior. I just like to keep felt on it. Keeps them from slipping around too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to do more to keep my plushies kind of in as best condition as I possibly can. Because, they're expensive. But, so here's a question. How do you determine the best price for custom plushies?
That's not an easy question. Pretty much it's only size based, and then when I do a test run, sometimes I'll give like a giant gap. Because it's like, okay, this is probably the cheapest I could get it to go down, and this is probably the most that it'll be. And I just give them that radius, and then when I do a test run of it, then I'll know exactly how much it's going to cost. But I won't know until I've actually came to the point where I'm assembling it, because time is a factor on this. And of course, more details, more time.
Right.
That's what I have to figure out.
And some people's OCs are extremely detailed.
Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes you're like, okay, do I really want to deal with this, or do I need to say no? I have the bad habit of not saying no, and I need to learn to say no more often.
Well, we all got to determine our limits. So, well, one kind of final question here. How was my OC to make? Was it bad? Was it good? Was it absolutely a nightmare?
I got to pull up the picture again real quick. Because I have a mental picture of it, but it's nice to look at the actual picture to see if I forget something. The hardest part about it was the hooves. The hoop details, because it's not like they're not like static; they're actually 3D. Because normally, what I do with stallions that have the fluffy hooves, as I call them, is I just applique them on. But with yours, I decided to experiment a little and try to make them more 3D.
Okay.
And that's why they come off the hoop instead of just being like attached to it and flat.
I really appreciate that. It's a nice little detail.
Thanks. I like to try different things, and sometimes I don't tell people I'm going to experiment a little. But I like, as long as it comes out good, no one's going to complain.
I mean, I'm one of those people that, I was just happy to have you work on my OC and make me my plushie. So I didn't care. Like, I usually like to provide, anytime I ask for a commission or whatever, I give them the basics of what I'm looking for, but then I give them the full range option with creative freedom.
That's kind of what I do when I commission. Like, I don't normally commission plush makers. I normally commission artists. And I'll be like, okay, this is the character I want. Here's like the expression. And then he's like, you could do with the rest. And they're like, oh, okay. And they usually just ask for their personalities. And so I kind of get that. I just don't do it with plushies. I rarely get to commission other plush makers because plushies cost a lot. And even though I'm making plushies myself, I have to focus more on bills and so on.
Right. Yeah, and I bet, having to, with all the commissions you get, which I know are a lot, I'm sure that, you'd like to spend some time making your own plushies, but... Well, do you do that? Do you actually spend time making your own plushies?
Every now and then I might make myself something, but normally I don't really need a lot. I'm kind of weird. I'm a little frugal with my stuff. At first, I used to want to keep everything I make. Then you just kind of like, oh, well, I need this, and this is your business now, so you got to stop trying to keep everything and start, giving stuff. Well, not giving, but selling stuff, so you can keep making more. But for the most part, I don't keep any plushies I make except for a rare few, and then I end up selling them later on when I'm needing some extra stock for a con. So I don't get to hold on to any plushies I make for myself because I end up selling them anyways. But if I commission someone for a plushie, then I just keep that plushie forever.
Right. Well, that would make sense. So, well, I really appreciate you having the opportunity to come on my podcast and help us understand the secret society of plushie making.
It gets dark, well, not darker, deeper than this, but yes, it's just the top layer of plush making.
The top layer. Okay, I think that's good. Well,
yeah, if it gets any deeper, then it's going to be a lot more talking, a lot more, what's the word? Not anecdotes, but acronyms for things. It's interesting. We have a whole conspiracy area.
Okay. Well, anyways, I think that's about all the time we have for tonight. So, as always, guys, this is Dratta Arcana. If you're looking to contact me, you can contact me in a variety of ways via Dratta Arcana Gaming on Facebook or dratta.arcana@gmail.com. As always, I have a community Discord now. Link will be in the description. And once again, this is Dratta Arcana and with special guest
Kiashone.
And we'll talk to you later, every pony and every creature.
I